Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen, and we're here with comic Jen Lapp. Jen Lapp, how the hell are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming in. And then where can people find you on stage in New York City doing stand-up comedy, and where can they find you online if they're not in the city?
So online, you can find me at Jen Lapp Comedy. That's on Instagram and Twitter. And I perform all over. I'm usually at New York Comedy Club. If you follow me on my website at jenlapp.com, my schedule's changing all the time. So follow me there, and I post my schedule, and I perform pretty regularly around the city.
And then, you're a good follow on Twitter. And what do you think is the role of being a comedian on Twitter? Like, is that where you're putting disposable jokes, or do you feel comfortable putting your stage material into your tweets? I mean, do you think people steal them? Do you think Twitter's kind of a disposable medium, or so there's not really a good place for that?
I use Twitter. I feel like a lot of jokes that work on Twitter don't work on stage.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's usually just testing ground. Like, I just kind of spew whatever I'm thinking onto Twitter, and if something sticks, then we'll see if it does well on stage. But like I said, it usually doesn't. It's very strange that, like, one medium doesn't transfer to the other.
Yeah.
I usually like to post my tweets on Instagram also, which is counterintuitive, but it has helped me get, like, a pretty decent following, and has helped me get some work through that, which is nice. Unfortunately, there are all these meme pages that are, like, stealing my stuff, and that's happened. That's happened a lot. I've had, like, a lot of people send me my own jokes with my name removed from it, and
that's
pretty
awful.
Yeah, that sucks. So when you're, like, scrolling through Instagram and you see this joke and you're like, oh, that looks so familiar, and then you realize, oh, because I wrote it.
That is a good joke. I'm so glad somebody else is just telling my comedy. And then is the role of is your act, like, one of the things we're going to talk about is Broadway musicals and Queen the band, and also drag queens, which is just bizarre to talk about because I'm not a drag queen. I don't know any drag queens, but I do see some comedy shows that have just drag queens as one of the integral components. And I almost think I saw a picture of you and maybe a drag queen on Instagram. And So kind of like, do you think that, compared to your Twitter account, do you think that your act is at all influenced by the production values and the fabulousness of those things that I just mentioned, Broadway musicals, drag queens, and Queen?
I wish, but no. I can't. I have so much respect for drag queens. I got into it basically through watching RuPaul's Drag Race, and I had no idea how much comedy was involved in doing drag. And I mean, they can do everything. They can sing, dance, act, do comedy, and then on top of all that, they have to do hair, makeup, and make themselves look a certain way. So I mean, I just have, like, the utmost respect for them. I don't think my comedy is as theatrical as Queen would be, or drag queens, or Broadway musicals. I'm a little bit more dry, not a lot of act outs, very sort of I wish I could be as fabulous as them, but that's
I mean, you're so clever that that's why people are stealing your shit on Instagram.
I guess so, yeah.
And so do you think that as a comedy fan, meaning like as somebody who looks at as RuPaul's Drag Race and say, man, they're fucking hilarious, I need to up my game, like somebody who's dry and not a lot of act outs, is it natural to be drawn towards the opposite end of the spectrum, like the fabulousness? Is that why you're so interested in it, do you think?
Yeah, I think so, because I think there is, like, a part of me that wishes I had that sort of stage presence.
Yeah.
And drag queens are also, like, I mean, if you go to any drag show in New York City, their crowd work is phenomenal.
Yes.
I mean, and they have this ability to sort of rag on people, but in this very endearing way that, like, it just ingratiates them with their crowd. It's really an amazing talent.
And they're kind of breaking down barriers, like getting somebody to laugh even though he's a hard ass and he's got his arms crossed. It's breaking down a barrier. And is there anything that you can do in your act that can, in the same way, break down barriers in the audience? Like, you don't do any crowd work?
I do some crowd work, and I do enjoy doing crowd work. You got to find that one person who's just having a great time, and I experienced that recently with a show that I was on last week. And if you can get into a good rapport with that person, I mean, it's such a good time. It's so much fun.
And so it's also kind of a form of crowd control, because although they're having a good time, you don't want them to distract other people with their good time.
Right. I mean, there's always that risk, because sometimes if you really get into a good rapport with a crowd member, then they start to think that they get used to those laughs, and then they kind of take their own liberties with their participation, and you're like, okay, we had our thing, it was funny, now you need to shut the fuck up. Like, crowds are people don't know how to be in a comedy show. It's very interesting.
And especially if you are just kind of a little bit more dry or clever or whatever, it would seem like you would need to somehow establish your presence in another way. Otherwise, it could risk some of those people in the audience, trying to take over because
totally.
they think they're funnier or something.
Oh, yeah. It's the worst. The worst is when you're having just a terrible set. And this has happened to me before. You're just having a terrible set. The crowd is not having you whatsoever. And then a crowd member says something and uproarious laughter.
Oh, no.
And it's just like, and now they're encouraged. And now they're like, it's just, yeah. Like I said, I don't think a lot of people know how to be in a comedy show. It is very different. It's not like going to a concert. It's not like, you should be giving it the same amount of attention that you would give a Broadway play, basically. You just sit there and take it all in and enjoy it. But because there's not as much, I don't want to say pomp and circumstance, but there's not as much, it's very bare bones. There's not this huge set design. There's not huge, costumes or whatever. It's just a person standing on stage talking into a mic like a regular person. So they don't realize.
A lot of quiet as opposed to the noise of a Broadway show where you couldn't even make your voice heard if you tried.
Right, exactly.
And so is there anything that you're doing to like almost flex the other muscle? Not only because of crowd control, but I mean, not doing any act outs. Is there any... like let's talk about your material, and is there any kind of, what are you talking about on stage, and is there anybody in that play, meaning in your cast of characters in your comedy, that can be maybe turned into a caricature a little bit so that you can do a voice or something to kind of show everybody in the audience that I'm not just dry and clever.
Right.
I also have these other muscles to flex.
Sure. Yeah. I got, I'm working on a little bit about my parents and how they recently redid my childhood bedroom.
What the temerity of these people? Who the fuck are they?
Yeah. So my mom's a good character to play off of. So like I said, I don't do a lot of voices. I occasionally do some act outs, but it's really not it's just not my natural style. Yeah.
Well, it's good what you're kind of what you're good at and what you're maybe not as comfortable with doing. So what are some of the other things in that cast of characters that you're talking about? Like, do you talk about your childhood at all, or are you talking about the world as you're currently experiencing it?
Well, I talk a lot about dating. Okay. And my previous experience dating. I talk about my boyfriend a little bit. I talk about my family and some politics. But there's not really like a person that I focus on a lot. I'm kind of all over the place.
And it's all through the lens of Jen Lab.
Yeah.
Kind of like, what is your perspective on things like politics? Like, are you seeing the ridiculousness on both sides, or are you saying that the pendulum of PC culture is swinging in the right direction at the right speed,
right,
and hasn't swung too far?
It's interesting because I consider myself to be pretty liberal.
Okay.
But I have had the PC police come after me.
The liberal PC police came after their own?
Yes.
What the hell?
And it's really like, I don't consider myself to be a controversial comic.
Okay.
Not because, that's not where my material usually goes. So when people take my pretty innocuous stuff and find ways to get enraged by it, I'm like, oh my God, y'all need to calm the hell down. This is like, you are fighting the wrong person right now.
Yeah, the next comic up has a lot more shit to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's...
what do they come after you for? If you can say.
Sure. I had a joke. I have a joke that is doing really well. I do it on stage. So this is one of the few examples where it did well on Twitter, and it's doing really, really well on stage.
Okay.
And it's basically about... Do you want me to tell the joke?
If you can.
Yeah, sure. So the joke is that, the guy I'm dating right now, he's wonderful, and we had a little bit of a scare recently. I had to take Plan B, and he actually went out and he bought it for me. And I was like, oh my God, this man is amazing. I have to hold on to him. So I didn't take it.
I love that. I thought you were going somewhere else. And you probably also, you probably did go somewhere else first, which is like, what does that say about this guy that really wants me to bore his fetus?
Right.
And then you bring up Plan B, I didn't take it. That's hilarious. I got to hang on to this guy, so I didn't take it. Wow.
Thank you.
I just love that, too, because if you're the type of person who, meaning like, a comic who talks about Plan B, you would think is just overtly sexual and has a lot of sex and stuff like that with just strangers or something. But then in one turn, you're talking about now, like, I'm just a family. I really want a family just like other people. So there's kind of some misdirection without being.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, not to toot my own horn, but I think it's a great joke in that it's short. It's like the misdirection is right there. It's just like, it hits really quickly. And I posted that online and I got a really nasty comment from someone being like, "Oh, so you're just going to trap this man in a relationship that he doesn't want to be in?" And I just wanted to, I don't feed the trolls. It's just I really
don't
hate
feed the trolls.
I hate confrontation. So like, I just for the after like first 10 minutes, I'm usually like, oh my God, I'm gonna say something to them, and then I usually am just like, no, it's not worth my time and energy. But I really wanted to respond to this person and be like, are you okay? Like, do you need a hug?
Yeah, did this happen to you? Did you get trapped?
It sounds like you had a really bad day.
Yeah, and a bad lifetime. Maybe somebody trapped you. I'm a comedian, and so I'm being hilarious.
Right, exactly.
And so, take your serious shit and say it into the mirror.
Yeah.
Wow, and maybe, maybe you could, because I'm thinking, like, if you're keeping this wonderful gem of a joke short, it's almost like you can punch it, but then you can almost go back and revisit it through stuff like that. Through, somebody said this online, and what I said was this, and just think of the best, are you okay?
Right.
Because, like, and so I guess the question I have is, how are you going to take that A+ gem and take any other B+ material you have and bring it up to that level?
Right.
The perfect amount of believability, but also misdirection, and it's short and it's punchy. How do you get everything else to rise to that level?
Ugh, I mean, that's...
Because that's a joke that any comedian would be proud to close with.
Oh, thank you.
Right?
I think, thank you. That's really tough. That's one of those jokes where I thought of the premise, and then I wrote it out, and then I very quickly rechanged it. Okay. Like, I changed it for it to be a quicker, more succinct, better punch. And it was just one of those that I feel like you should never stick with the first writing of the joke. Yeah. It could always be improved. But this one, I just kind of got lucky, and I was like, it does, and it's interesting when you do it on stage, people get to know you better. They know the voice that you're saying it in, so they're not as offended by it when I do it, because they know you by then.
And so is that the kind of persona that you have? So, somebody's actively dating and things like that. And do you notice that a lot of your material they tend to laugh at a lot of that material because you have an established persona of being somebody who's out there dating?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Do you talk about other things like dating apps and things like that?
Oh, yeah. I talk about dating apps and just like I was single for a really long time, just like perpetually single.
Okay. Because you're so hilarious?
I think that was
Men
probably...
were threatened, right?
I think that was one of the issues, for sure. Yeah, I mean, dating as a comedian is absolutely dreadful.
Okay. And why do you think that is? Like, even somebody like Nikki Glaser is always talking about it. It's, men who get on stage and they do something hilarious, women are just waiting to date them. But, strong, hilarious women on stage, they get off stage and, men are just, they're not fanning out over female comedians in the same way. Why do you think that is? Is it because men think they're funny and a funnier woman would really threaten their security?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think when men say that they want a woman who has a good sense of humor, they mean a woman who laughs at their jokes. I think, the act of going on stage, commanding a crowd, I mean, that's like very intimidating.
Yeah, it's very strong. Not many can do it. It's like wrangling bulls or something.
Exactly. So I think that's very intimidating to them. I think someone who, there is a correlation between being funny and being smart. Yeah. So not only is this person strong and able to do this very intimidating thing, but they're also very smart too. So it comes with a lot of stuff. And you always get the guys who are like, oh, I've always wanted to do stand-up, or I could do stand-up. And I mean, even outside of dating, there's nothing worse than a person who's like, oh, I could do stand-up. Because you're like, well, then fucking do it.
Yeah, even Whitney Cummings is saying stuff like that, where a dude who thinks he can do stand-up is dating her and then starts doing stand-up during her.
Horrible.
And so kind of what are the professions of the dudes who you've been successfully dating, and what do they have in common that, why aren't they threatened by somebody smart and funny and confident?
I think, I mean, my boyfriend's just sitting outside of the studio right now. He's such a gem.
Yeah, we should bring him and ask him.
We should. He's a physical therapist.
Oh, okay.
And he has even admitted, he's like, I could never do stand-up.
Good. That's
you
a
love
good place
people
to
like
start.
that. Yeah. Like, I could never do it. Someone who realizes that it's not just talking. There's so much more than just talking into a microphone.
Yeah.
Because there's, the pros make it look easy.
Yeah.
It really just looks like someone talking.
Right.
And he's just very confident. He's just very, like, confident in himself. Like, he doesn't have anything to prove.
Oh, good, because it seems like as a physical therapist, he would have just command over the physical body, which is
Yeah.
good. Which is good, but it's also he leaves the whole, being funny and commanding a room to you. And that's kind of nice that you have the different spheres of influence or whatever. And so if people want to see you talk about dating and dating on apps and just hilarious jokes about Plan B, who thought like someday, I had no idea there'd be a Plan B, let alone a funny joke about it. They can see you online by going to GenLap Comedy across all social. Do you have genlapcomedy.com as well?
Just genlap.com.
Okay. And then they can see all your shows, and you've been doing... Where were you at? Broadway Comedy Club? Where have you been playing?
I'm usually at New York Comedy Club.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I'm usually there. And then just a lot of independent shows run by comics.
Okay, and they can find you online. And then if you get upset with anything she says online, please just
go see a therapist.
See a therapist, but also give her more material, and just because she will feed the trolls and then bring it on stage, and you will be a joke on the stage. So that's so great, Jen Lap. Thank you so much.
Thank you.